We got the basic CRUD operations with MongoDB covered. How you can insert, find, update, and delete elements with MongoDB. And you also learned how to connect to MongoDB. Now, let me show you how you can now work with relations. And for that, let's work with some users again. Now, with SQLize, we didn't have an authentication flow, and we will not have one here either. But now I want to create new users at the beginning here. And for that, I'll first of all work on my user model, of course. I'll keep it really simple, but of course, I'll again a normal JavaScript class again. So let me create a new class, user, and add a constructor. And in that constructor, I'll get a username and an email, let's say. And then I'll just store this in a name property and in an email property. And you could add more. You could work with this however you want. I'll then add a save method to be able to save that user to the database. And of course, I'll also add a static method for finding a user by ID. And here we'll get the user ID as an argument. Now, here's your challenge. Try this on your own. Pause the video here and try implementing this on your own. Try using MongoDB and that central MongoDB connection we have to save a user with the help of the save method and to find it by ID. Good luck. After a short break, which gives you the chance to pause the video, we'll solve this together. Were you successful? Well, let's start by first of all importing our Mongo database client. So I'll name this DB again, and I'll import it by requiring our database file in the util folder, and there I'll access getDB, and I'll name this getDB up here too. Now let's start with the save method. And there I'll create a new constant, db, and I'll call getDB to store my database client in that constant. Now on that client, on this constant here, we can reach out to a collection, and obviously this will now not be the products collection, but we could name it users collection if we wanted to. Now, in this collection, I want to insert one new element here, and that new element will be this. So this JavaScript object we're in. So an object with a name and an email property. This is what I want to store as a user for now. Now, with that, we can again use the then and catch if we want to, or we just return that and let whoever calls this listen to that if there is a need for that. Now we can also work on find by ID already. And there I again will get access to my database client. And then I will return db collection users. And here I now want to use find again to find a specific user. We can narrow the user down by comparing the underscore ID. And now the important thing here is, of course, that you need to convert user ID, which I expect to be a string here, to an object ID. So let me import MongoDB by requiring MongoDB like this. And now here I'll follow a slightly different approach, which I also already showed before. And I'll create an object ID constant and simply store access to it by accessing it up here. But I'm not calling it, I'm not creating an object ID here, I'm just storing the reference to the object ID class in my object ID constant. And then down there, I can just write new object ID thanks to my constant up there and pass user ID to it. And this should find me all fitting users, and I therefore get back a cursor. And now I can call next to get the first, and as we know, only element that matters to us. So now I'm returning this here. As a side note, you could also use find one if you're sure that you only find one element, and this will now not give you a cursor, but immediately return that one element. So then this would be an alternative, and I will use that here, but of course this is something I haven't shown you before, so if you used find and next, that's perfectly fine. So here I'll use find one, and now I got two methods in place that should allow me to create new users and to then find that user. Now with that user model added, let me go back to the app.js file, and in there I will import my model. So here I'll import user by requiring user from /models/user like that. With user imported, first of all, we had some code here, which I want to comment back in, where I want to find a user with this ID here and then store it in the request. So I will still use that here. However, I'll change the ID in a second. First of all, when connecting, I also want to add some code to see if a user with a certain ID exists. And for that, I will actually create that user here in Compass. So I'll connect to the shop database and I'll create a new collection here, users. And of course, this collection name here should be the collection name you chose in your code. I'll create a new collection and then go into that collection. And now, if you have a look at your user model, here I'm storing a name and an email for a new user. So if we want to create one behind the scenes in Compass, we can insert a new document here. And here is the automatically generated ID. And I can enter a name, and you can use any name you want here. And of course, an email. And insert that document. And now it's this ID, this part here between the quotation marks that matters to me. I'll take that and I'll use that in app.js. So here, I could now create that user if it didn't exist, but of course I now know it exists because I created it behind the scenes. Later we'll add a real authentication flow where users can sign up by themselves, no worry. But here in my middleware where I find a user by ID, I can now search for that ID and I convert that in the user model. Remember, that is why I can use a string here. Okay, so now I have that in place again. I get access to my user and now we're at least prepared to set up a connection between our product and our user, which we can use later. So let me save that. That should work. And in the next lecture, let's use that user object and store a reference to that user in our database.